Hello, this is Todd Danielson, the Editorial Director of Informed Infrastructure. On February 10, 2022, I spoke with Maria Lehman, President-elect of the American Society of Civil Engineering, ASCE, and Director of U.S. Infrastructure for GHD Group. We talked about the new bipartisan infrastructure law and how engineers can benefit from it, as well as how she'd like to improve ASCE when she becomes president in October 2022. Please briefly summarize your industry education, professional background, and current roles at GHD and ASCE.
Well, I started off in civil engineering at the State University of New York at Buffalo more than 40 years ago. I've been in the business for 40 years, and I have worked in the private sector and the public sector over that time. 2 stints as a client. One as the Commissioner of Public Works for Erie County, New York. So those of you who are thinking, winter, yes, I know how to deal with a 7-foot snowstorm in a couple of days and how to clear it out. And then I worked for Governor Cuomo for 5 years, first as risk manager on the Tappan Zee, and then as chief operating officer of the Thruway Authority in New York. In the meantime, in between all those times, several private sector engagements on various projects, from very small local to very large infrastructure projects and program management roles. And I came to GHD actually in the middle of the pandemic, almost 2 years ago now. I still have not set foot into an office. I've been working from home that whole time, doing a lot of Zoom calls with people around the country and actually around the world. And my role at GHD is I'm the Director of Infrastructure for the United States. So it is about future strategy. It's about how do we get our various business lines to work together on some of the challenges that we are seeing as a country in infrastructure, as well as federal government relations, how we align our client base to what happened with the Infrastructure Jobs Act, as well as government affairs on the federal and, running a group around the country, with various states. I am the current ASCE president-elect of the society worldwide. ASCE is 150,000 members in 177 countries. We are the largest publisher of civil engineering materials, a lot of conferences, a lot of knowledge transfer. It's an educational organization. And we are the proud publisher of the Report Card on America's Infrastructure. I will become president of the society in October of this year.
What's your opinion of the new infrastructure law and how will it help the industry?
I'm a big fan of the law. I've been working on getting more federal engagement in various classes of infrastructure since 1998 when ASCE did its first report card. I've served on several of the committees. I was actually on the committee as a road bridge expert for the launch last year. And we've been pushing for more funding because we have been not paying attention. Our infrastructure is, in a lot of places, outlived its useful life by 2 or 3 times what the design life is. And so I laughed that our infrastructure was not in a midlife crisis, but in an old age crisis. So it's very important that there's partnerships. In the report card, we did a failure to act report specific to highways, surface transportation, roads, bridges. We did one this past year on water, wastewater, and one on electric transmission. And then using others that were less than 5 years, came up with an overall view, economic view, of what happens if we continue to kick the can down the road. The answer to that equation was that there is, between all sources, what the needs are that the federal government collects and publicizes so that the public can go get, between what the needs are and what, when you add all sources, local, state, federal, and private, that's being invested, the gap was $2.6 trillion over 10 years. So if you look at what we got in the act, let's assume we're doing everything linear because we don't have anything else to work with here. So 2.6 becomes 1.3 over 5 years. The 1.3 that was passed, there was 550 billion of new money. So the rest of it was reauthorizing for 5 years the Surface Transportation Act, the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and several smaller things. But we're still getting that 550 billion of new money. So a little less than half. It's very significant. There's never been a bigger investment, but it's a good start. It's not the silver bullet. It will make an impact in certain areas. For example, in the bridge program across the country, the intent is to do 15,000 bridges across the country that are in poor and fair condition, with a lot of focus on that last mile, local bridges. It's going to make a huge impact. I think people are going to be swearing at us over the process because you're going to have cones and barrels everywhere. That's a lot of bridges. But it's going to make a big impact because I truly believe that you cannot build a healthy economy on a crumbling infrastructure. So it is going to matter to every small business, medium size, and big business to get their goods to market effectively and efficiently.
How long do you think it will take the new law to improve U.S. infrastructure in a tangible way?
Well, we're all hopeful that you're going to start seeing some things as early as this summer. You're going to start seeing cones and things this summer because there's a number of projects that, maybe were in preliminary design or have been shelved or are not, they aren't taking right away. There's not environmental impacts. You're replacing something in kind. You can put those out pretty quick. So I think you're going to start seeing that this summer. The beauty of this, as opposed to what we had with ARA in 2008, 2009, there is no magic shelf of all these wonderful projects that we can deliver in a very short time frame. Environmental processing, whether it's federal using NEPA or in states that require state environmental processing and stakeholder reviews and all those things, you can expedite that. I've done it twice on 2 mega projects in a little over a year. But then you have to design, you have to construct. The beauty of this law is because it's 5 years, you have to authorize in that 5 years. So you can do some of the low-hanging fruit now and still hit some of the really game-changing projects that are really going to unite communities, make an impact on underserved communities. But that's a long process. So on the Surface Transportation Network, the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit, Federal Railway, they have a program and it goes back to the states. So they give to 52 jurisdictions, Puerto Rico and DC and the 50 states. And each state has a state transportation improvement program that's built from regional ones, whether they're metropolitan planning organizations in the bigger cities, those areas around them, or rural planning organizations in some states. They have this year's plan, what's going to happen next year. They have these 5-year plans. They also have a 20-year long-range plan of projects that if they had the money, they would do. So what will happen with this bill is, maybe in the 5-year plan, some of the projects in year 4 or 5 will move up to year 1, 2, or 3 because there's more money. And then they'll pull from that long-range plan. There still will be brand new projects brought in and they have to get incorporated. But people have already thought about what you would do if you had more money to address it. Same thing with water agencies, wastewater agencies, and when they go to state revolving loan funds, same thing. They're always oversubscribed for those loan funds for projects. And so they'll be able to fund more of the projects that kind of have been in line. So in those 2 areas, it's just a matter that the bottom of the funnel is bigger. We can put more work through it. Things like broadband, for example, is a little more complicated because the federal government's never been in that business. And so they're going to have to set up block grant programs to the states, and then individual states are going to figure out how to divvy that out. So it'll be a little lumpy. It won't be consistent across all states. But just because the amount of time and energy it takes to create a new program and promulgate new rules and go through that whole process, that's counterintuitive if you want to get the money out there based on all these issues. So there's plenty of places to prime the pump. And so I think in some areas you're really going to be able to see acceleration pretty quickly. And then the more complicated or larger projects or bigger constituencies will fill in the outer years.
Can you describe a part of the law that isn't getting a lot of attention, will be very important to the infrastructure industry?
Well, I personally feel that broadband is really important. The infrastructure industry has really not changed much in 100 years. We still use concrete and steel everywhere. There's some admixtures that are new, there's some processes, but if somebody time traveled from then to now, they'd still recognize what we're doing. It's not seeing the disruptive changes that other industries have seen. Because we don't have broadband everywhere, and it's not about rural deserts, it's about urban deserts. It's about major highways where you have drop-offs on your cell phones. Okay, I mean, there's just all kinds of examples of that. The Internet of Things can provide real-time data to a lot of different things to really make safer environments, expedite the amount of construction work that can be done and how much of it can be automated, and really change how we deliver projects. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's working for a startup company that's actually doing electric construction vehicles, which are kind of scary because they're really quiet. They have to put a lot of extra bells and whistles on them. So you hear them because, like, you certainly hear a diesel construction, a piece of diesel equipment. So they're working in that, but because they're working in that space and large batteries for powerful engines, they're also looking at things like the backup batteries at traffic signals, because the lithium ion batteries now are so much better. Those are mostly old, zinc, lead, whatever batteries. And so when the power goes out, you could have checked it yesterday, it could be dead today, and you don't have a backup. So think about the application in traffic signals when your signals go down because there's no power. Or think about safety features around rail crossings. These are transformative. They're not huge things. But when you start looking at how being able to get the broadband signal that says, you know what, your battery that runs your rail safety gate at XYZ location is running low, and they're going to be solar, okay, you need to go check on it. It's going to be much more proactive in the operations and maintenance time period, which we're typically very bad at, right? We build it and we forget about it. So there's great excitement, I think, around what some of that digitization of the industry and how you really can accelerate how you build things, how you operate them, getting more efficient. How do you take energy down sometimes because energy is really expensive at that load period? And, maybe you can change when you're doing a certain process that takes a lot of energy because you can do it in 2 hours as well. So there's all kinds of excitement about being able to flatten loads, be more cost effective and efficient, and deliver faster.
So what should our engineering audience be thinking about in terms of how this law will affect them and how they can use it to their advantage?
I think the law is going to affect everyone because, in essence, it is, in some cases, 60 or 70% more funding than we've had in the past. In some cases, it may be 120, 130. It's not as huge of a bump, but it's still a bump. We as an industry are not a neat bell-shaped curve anymore. We're following the U.S. population. Okay, so the baby boomers is a bigger chunk of everything. And as they retire out, the whole idea of workforce development, how do we bring younger engineers, contractors, people to the table, and how do we jumpstart their expertise is going to become very important. And whoever figures that out is going to win because there's going to be plenty of work. I mean, right now, there are spots in the country that aren't really busy, but there's spots in the country, for example, that you can't get a new survey done in 2022 because there are no surveyors to do that work. And so you're going to have to plan ahead around things, but it's going to have a very large impact on the industry, we're going to have to get more creative about how you do more, faster, cheaper, and how do you bring up a workforce to be able to do that with you. So I'm very happy that the bill also includes some of those provisions for workforce development, because it's going to be a challenge. It's just a demographic challenge based on, what our ages are in American demographics right now. So we'll see. I do want to add that I think I think the organization and the engineering community is very thankful for the fact that after probably close to 3 decades of a promise through both Democratic and Republican administrations, infrastructure is a priority. They've never been able to figure out the funding package. And the fact that they found a way to fund this without it being deficit spending, it's really behooves us to deliver the best we can in the next 5 years, because we really need to see these amped up levels for probably the next 15 to 20 to be able to bring everything up to snuff. And so we have to prove from an industry that we're going to do a good job with this, or we're not going to be getting the next tranche to really step it up again. And so I think it's very important for everybody to really work together to address some of the things that are making us less efficient and effective than we really should be.
So when you become president of ASCE, what will be some of your goals? Is there anything about the organization that you'd like to change?
Oh, absolutely. There's things I want to change. I wouldn't be there if I didn't. I think it all falls in one major goal and kind of 6 focus areas. First of all, we launched a few years ago what we called the Future World Vision. And it's basically coming up with VR and 3-dimensional tools to think about the challenges we might be seeing in 50 years. Very simply because we are putting things in place today that we anticipate will be here 50 years from now. So think about a very simple thing. If drones are going to be delivering lunches to, and it doesn't matter whether it's an office complex or some kind of housing complex, you have to have a place for them to come into and out of, because at lunchtime, otherwise you're going to have a mess, right? We've never thought about things in that, it's kind of Jetsons think, but we're getting to a place where definitely in the next 50 years that's going to happen. So we've done this program to really, and we'll be putting it out. Some of it at our convention in Anaheim this year, but the big push out will be next year as a function of having our megacity fully locked and loaded, and we'll be doing it through all kinds of museums across the country, because we need to get people excited about getting into the profession. We need to grow that pipeline so we have people, and we have to have everyone. So whether it's elected officials, whether it's city planners, thinking more critically about the fact that they're designing an asset that's got 50 years and things are going to look very different in 50 years. So all of this kind of falls into that. First of all, I want engineers to be back in the driver's seat for leading these big projects. We have given planning away, for example, to the big 4 accounting firms. And we saw during COVID, they have a very small engineering workforce. And so they didn't anticipate the problems that happen in a system of systems. When something goes wrong, there's domino effect. And COVID caused all kinds of those things to go sideways, right? So I think when you get somebody who is really taught to think critically and have plan B, C, and D in their pocket, because that's how engineers are wired, it really helps you to be able to deliver those things. So I think leading through the life cycle, looking at not only construction, but all the way through decommissioning of whatever that asset is, and making sure we're making the right life cycle decisions. Raising the grades. We celebrated this year. We went to a C minus. After 23 years, we went from a D cum to a C minus. There's nothing to celebrate about a C minus. I can tell you, we have 3 sons, all adults, all married, and a couple of which have kids. It would not have been a happy day if for 2 decades my boys brought home D's consistently. We can't accept that. So we have to raise the grades. I think you're going to see it with this investment. Some in 3 years from now when we do it, because we do it on 4-year cycles. but definitely 8 years from now, you're going to see an impact. So doing all we can to be more effective and efficient with the money we're given and being able to give bigger bang for the buck is really important. Third is a healthy and sustainable organization. It is drastically changing. There's more open content. People are less likely to travel to conventions. We'll see once we get out of jail. I think there's going to be some pent up demand for a while just because people want to get out. But making sure that we're making the moves that were sustainable moving forward. Communication. ASCE does a lot of things for a lot of people. Just like any other major organization, it's hard to get all the information into the right hands. So we just updated the website to use AI. So like the civil engineering source, which is kind of like your daily thing that you get from ASCE, watches what you're looking at and what you're interested in, and so it customizes to your interests. So you just don't get volumes of material. You get things that's relevant to you. Fifth thing is diversity and inclusion. I'm sad to say that I've been in the business for 40 years and things really haven't gotten that much better for women and minorities in the business. Not only we're up to about 30% women and we're a majority of the population. That's kind of disconcerting. But what's worse, it's not just about the pipeline, it's also about retainage. SWE, the Society of Women Engineers, did a study right before COVID that found in all engineering, 70% of women, 70, left engineering within 20 years of graduation. You can't solve that math problem. It's an indeterminate problem. You cannot take half the population away and then have 70% of them leave before they're really leading in the organization. So we have to be different. We have to be friendlier as the businesses that run in this space, so that people and that rises everybody's boat. That's a tide that rises everybody's boat. There's a lot more daddy tracked engineers, for example, or whether you're talking about Black and brown community, whether you're talking about the gay community. Many of those folks want different lifestyles now, and COVID, I think, this whole the great resignation, people just don't want to be pushed as hard as they have been in the past. And so employers are going to have to change their mindset for everybody's sake. Because the 70-year-olds that took their kids out on Sunday to see their project sites and work 70 hours the rest of the week, those people don't exist anymore. And they're running it. So I think that's really important. And then last, I talked about the demographics. We have life members, these, 65 plus, a lot of them, and every year more. Getting them, many of them are still working. Many of them still have a lot to give, but we haven't found a way to reach back to our students and to our younger members to teach them the ropes, whether it's in policy, whether it's in supercharging their technical skills or their what we call power skills, their communications, how you run a project, consider the financing, make those relationships. It's not formal mentoring. It's more like phone a friend mentoring. And so doing much more of that will benefit both sides. And so I want to see a lot more of that going on.